Hello, I'm Phil Vogelsang with Friends of Discovery Park. Our mission is to protect and preserve the park. You can find out more about us at www.fodp.org. This talk is the second of a series about the park. This place has a long and distinguished history. We at Friends of Discovery Park are proud of that history and celebrate this remarkable place whose destiny we all share. I hope these short talks will help all of you understand why Discovery Park is so important and what you can do to protect Seattle's greatest open space. My first talk focused on a short but remarkable time of military construction at the top of the hill called the Fort Lawton Air Force Station, what it was and how it came to be. You can find it on the Friends of Discovery Park YouTube channel. In this second talk, I'll be taking a closer look at that same top-of-the-hill site today, and what's left over, what it looks like now, and perhaps with help from our elected officials, what we hope it might look like in the future. What if I told you that somewhere in Discovery Park there is nearly 2 acres of publicly owned land that has been sitting there, empty, vacant, unused and fenced off from public access for the past 50 years? Wouldn't you think that the highest and best use would be to allow the public to access that land and use it as a park, rather than being fenced off and access restricted for no good reason? And what if I told you that the property I'm talking about wasn't located at the bottom of a ravine or on the very edge of the park, but rather in the middle of the park, at one of the most strategic sites of old Fort Lawton, on the very top of the hill, where there is, without doubt, the best and most scenic views of the parade grounds, the turn-of-the-century historic buildings, the Sound, and the Olympic Mountains, all right out in front of you. I don't think that anyone could argue that such property, on a square-foot basis, wouldn't be the most valuable real estate in all of Discovery Park. And yet, it sits empty and unused. The land I'm talking about is something called the NOAA parcel, and it sits right next to the FAA tower. So close to the tower, in fact, that no one ever stops to think that it is actually separate from the radar tower. That's the land I'm referring to. That's the nearly 2 acres of prime real estate, sitting vacant for 50 years, fenced off and unused in the middle of the park and on top of the highest hill. There's an interesting backstory because it used to be part of something called the Fort Lawton Air Force Station. Here's the original site plan. To counter the threat of Russian bombers approaching us over the North Pole, a massive Nike command and control center was built in 1960 on top of the hill, complete with 4 large radar domes and 4 windowless bunkers, the largest of which had 8-foot thick walls built deep into the side of the hill, not to mention lots and lots of concrete. Once bombers and the missiles that targeted them became obsolete, the site was decommissioned in 1963. After decommission, nearly all the buildings and radar towers were demolished and reforested, but they kept up one radar, the one owned and operated by the FAA. Currently known as the Federal Aviation Administration's radar facility at Fort Lawton, our familiar golf ball and its support building monitors all commercial and military air traffic in and around the Puget Sound. I'm told it can see out over the horizon, nearly 300 miles. It's part of a much larger networked radar system, made up of 46 identical structures spread out across the entire country. This network monitors all of the country's air traffic. Thanks to Google Earth, we can virtually visit any of them. Here's a typical site. This one is way up in the northwest corner of the Olympic Peninsula, on Cape Flattery, near the town of Neah Bay. But like the Fort Lawton facility, there are others located in urban areas. Here's one in St. Louis, Missouri. This entire facility occupies just over 1/2 acre. Here's another in a residential neighborhood in Minneapolis. It sits on a compact site of 0.4 acres. Now take a look at our facility. The FAA site in Discovery Park totals 2.31 acres, much larger than the others we looked at. See how the radar facility uses only a small amount of the total land, and what an obstacle it presents to the public who might want to access views from the top of the hill? Now this site is actually made up of two different parcels. Let's take a look at them. The original site is square-shaped and pretty close to 0.5 acres and is nearly identical to the other square-shaped footprints of the other urban FAA locations. Now take a look at the surrounding property that measures approximately 1.8 acres of land and is essentially empty. This is called the NOAA parcel, named for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Now, how NOAA came to own this property and for what purpose, I honestly don't know. But in 2002, NOAA officially transferred ownership to the FAA. And this is the land I would suggest should rightly be open to the public for access. Now there's one small caveat to this, and that is a small accessory radio building with backup generator and propane tank. It's within the NOAA parcel, but just outside the square footprint of the radar dome. Here we can see it outlined in red in relation to the FAA footprint outlined in yellow. It would be relatively cheap and easy to enclose and secure in new fencing. Total length needed is about 200 feet. Seen here in yellow is the section of fence that could be removed to allow public access. It's about 1,200 feet in total length. And from directly overhead, the blue line showing where the FAA perimeter fence is, and the red line showing the fence we propose to have removed. By removing this redundant and unnecessary fencing and putting up a new, much smaller fence for just the accessory radio building, new pedestrian access will develop and allow the public to move around on top of the hill, both east to west and north to south, all by simply removing and replacing some inexpensive fencing. Currently, the only access around the radar dome is along the south side, seen here in black. Access is blocked along the north side. You can see how much easier it would be to access the top of the hill if that redundant fence were removed and the working footprint of the FAA shrunk to 1/2 acre. Our goal would be to integrate the Fort Lawton FAA site into the surrounding park, much like the Minneapolis site that is designed to blend into the surrounding neighborhood. As part of this project, the remaining pavement could be removed and the site landscaped with appropriate trails and native plantings to make the parcel more park-like and more appropriate for its location in the middle of Discovery Park. Here's a view of that same pavement from the ground. There would be many benefits. Keep in mind, first, there would be no impact on the site's function. It would be business as usual for the FAA. The public would have access to the top of the hill on land that is owned by the public, but yet has been restricted from access for over 50 years. And our FAA site would be much more integrated into the surrounding park, much like we see in Minneapolis. How could we accomplish this? Like all things publicly owned, we would ask for this change through our elected officials. Andrew Lewis, District 7 Seattle Council member, and representing Magnolia on the City Council, has been briefed on this proposal and agrees with the merits. He has agreed to work with the Seattle City Mayor Jenny Durkin and together write a letter to Senator Patty Murray, asking her to intervene with the FAA through its director, Michael Huerta. Here are some key points to keep in mind. First, this wouldn't require any transfer of ownership. The FAA would continue to own the property. Their access to the property wouldn't change. All we're asking is to give us permission to reconfigure the fence line and re-landscape the site so that the facility blends in more naturally with the surrounding park. Friends of Discovery Park stands by, ready to fund the cost. No taxpayer dollars would be needed. So ask yourself, which FAA site does a better job of more appropriately incorporating into the surrounding landscape? Doesn't Seattle deserve the same treatment as Minneapolis? One of the most central and important works of Friends of Discovery Park is the return of all lands of the former Fort Lawton to the park. When the park officially opened in 1973, it was a victory, but at the same time the Army had still retained nearly 500 acres of land. Gradually over the years, thanks to the persistent demands of its citizens, these unused military lands were slowly added to Discovery Park. Although all of Seattle should be proud of this work, we are not satisfied until all the unused federal land is returned, no matter how small. So, thanks for listening. If you would like to help us in this effort or want to learn more about what we do, please visit us at www.fodp.org. Thank you.